our donations also are put to good use when disasters strike.
But we take it a step further. We want to care for them emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Our whole organization will be working very diligently to try to take care of the needs of our brothers and sisters, both physically and spiritually.
How is the relief work progressing? We're currently estimating that our disaster relief globally will cost about $60 million.
Let's start by asking a question. Should the governing body and the brothers who are taking the lead in our organization just mainly focus on spiritual matters and not be concerned about financial matters?
To my knowledge, Watchtower has never just come out and said any exact figures about how much money they're spending doing disaster relief or any humanitarian efforts. And this has always been a bit of a curiosity to people because most religious organizations that function as a charity do release this information. But Watchtower has never really come out and said anything. And to my surprise, they actually did this year when they did their end of the year roundup, and this is what they had to say. During the 2022 service year, our organization provided relief to victims of some 12 disasters. In total, we spent nearly $200 million in providing relief. So, pretty good numbers actually, if I'm completely honest. That would be about on par with other organizations. Oh, sorry. I read that wrong? Sorry, I have like the monitor in the ear. Oh. It was 200 disasters and only $12 million. I mean, surely they wouldn't publish that they only spent $12 million in providing relief. I mean, why would they want to make that public? I mean, that's embarrassing for $1 billion organization to only spend $12 million. Oh boy. Now, the reason that this is so completely shocking to me is because when we look at what we do know about how much money Watchtower is taking in from donations, it is a drop in the bucket, and a little bit more on that later. But first, I just wanted to compare what Watchtower does as far as humanitarian aid and relief work as compared to other religions that might be sort of similar to Jehovah's Witnesses. So first, let's look at the Adventists. I do this because Adventists are very similar to Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, they share a common history, right? So let's look at that to begin with. Unfortunately, we don't have any up-to-date information because they stopped in 2015 releasing their exact figures about how much money they bring in from tithing and how much money they're giving out. They just give like a total number of the beneficiaries. So we have to go back to numbers from 2015, but it still highlights my point all the same. So in 2015, the total value of aid that they provided was $291 million. $291 million. That is a significant increase from the $12 million that Jehovah's Witnesses spent in 2021. Now, again, this goes back to 2015, so whether that has increased or decreased, we don't really know exactly. Now let's take a look at the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. And if you look at their annual report, it is kind of funny that the Jehovah's Witnesses annual report that they give, which as far as I know, they haven't ever done this before, but it's so tiny. And yet when you look at other churches, and I looked at a whole bunch of them, they all have like these 25, 40, 50, 60 page like detailed breakdowns of exactly how money is spent, so people can see, okay, this is where our donations or tithes actually go to. But yes, if you look at the Church of Latter-day Saints, you'll see that they had a total in expenditures of $906 million. And this didn't just go to help fellow Mormons. This helped to go to a variety, at least it's reported that it went to a variety of causes for people that aren't even part of their church, whether this is providing food, clothing, medical supplies, education, you name it, they are right there on the money. Well, yeah, on the money. Now, I won't bore you guys and go down a bunch of other different religions, but this number is pretty consistent with, basing it on how big the church is and how much they give. And Watchtower must be on like rock absolute bottom of the barrel as far as charitable giving goes. It's shocking how little they do. There are local food banks in cities in America that are able to do more than a global organization that's taking in hundreds of millions of dollars of donations every year. It blows my mind. Now, the other important aspect of this is we don't get any exact figures of where the money went, because this could be problematic in another way. Yes, okay, they spent $12 million, but how much of that $12 million went to rebuilding and repairing kingdom halls, assembly halls, or branch offices? In my sort of reptilian brain, thinking about the natural disasters that happen around the world, if you would just ask me, hey, Wally, what do you think Watchtower spends on repairing kingdom halls, assembly halls, and branch offices around the world because of natural disasters? I'd probably say I don't know, like $10 to $20 million per year, depending on, what the weather was like. So it doesn't seem unreasonable to me that this $12 million was only spent repairing buildings that they own. So is that humanitarian relief? Is that providing disaster relief to anyone? Again, we don't know because they don't come out with these exact figures, but I don't think it's completely unreasonable to say that a significant amount of that $12 million did go just to repairing buildings that they own and can sell, which isn't humanitarian aid. That is buying a new pair of shoes because your shoe has a hole in it. That's not helping anyone. That's helping yourself as an organization. Now, one thing of note that if you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this, that you might bring up, and that is, we'll look at how much money we spend for our traveling missionaries, our circuit overseers, our special pioneers. That number is like $230 million per year. Okay, that's fine and cool, but these other religious organizations, these figures are their humanitarian efforts. They're already doing the spiritual side of stuff as well. So they're able to accomplish their spiritual ministry, able to handle all of that, and on top of that, they're doing this. And Watchtower is saying, yes, we're spending $230 million on circuit overseers and special pioneers, but we're only spending 12 on actual humanitarian aid. Now, even those numbers make me scratch my head, because if you go back to 2000, they were spending about $66 million. Now, that number also makes me scratch my head, because if you go back to 2000, they were spending $66 million, and that's when they had about 6,000 publishers. So it was something to the tune of $11 per publisher. And then if you go forward into 2021, we had them spending $230 million, and they had like 8.5 million people. Mental math. So that's $27 per person, per publisher. So why did the number of money per publisher necessary to shepherd the flock, right, by circuit overseers, special pioneers, all of those people, why did that increase by 145%? 145% increase between 2000, roughly, sorry, I mean, these aren't exact numbers, but between 2000 and 2021, so in that 20-year period. And if you think about like the US dollar, for instance, and the inflation, I think it's like 2-point-something% per year. So like if you went back to 2000 adjusting for inflation, it would be like a 57% increase. And yet Watchtower says, no, we've increased our spending by 145%. It always makes me scratch my head why the number or how much money they're spending on Circuit Overseers Special Pioneers has gone up so fast as compared to the number and growth of the organization. It really doesn't make any sense. Sorry about that long-winded rant, but now let's take a look at one thing that I think is hilarious and one thing that I think is nefarious, and that is Norway, first of all. I think what happened in Norway is absolutely hilarious. If you guys don't know, Watchtower is no longer receiving grants from the Norwegian government just for existing because of their practices when it comes to disfellowshipping, baptizing of children, and then shunning. They've said, no, this doesn't meet with our new laws, so you either have to change your practices or you no longer get the funding. And that funding was about $1.5 million. Which means the Norwegian government was contributing 10% of all the charitable work that Watchtower did on a global scale. Over 10% of that was coming just from their grants they were getting from the Norwegian government. And there are other governments around the world that also give them money just for existing. Are you kidding me? Watchtower, you look so stupid right now that you produced this little thing trying to pat yourself on the back with your tiny little, it's not insignificant, but it is pathetic. A pathetic amount of money that actually went into helping people in real ways. And the Norwegian government themselves contributed to over 10% of that, which I find absolutely hilarious. If I had trouble trying to get figures about some of the other governments and translation and me just not having enough time to do it, but yeah, it is a significant percentage that just the governments of the world are contributing as part of that $12 million. Now, I do want to actually highlight something that I think is a little bit nefarious, and that is how they are telling governments where they have a charitable status about how they're using their money. So we'll take an example because it's easy to find and I speak English. So let's look at what they tell the British Charities Commission. Is it Charities Commission? Something like that. So in 2000, the Watchtower started making an annual report. This is a financial report of the trustees of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Britain. And let's look at their one from 2021 so we can get an idea about what Watchtower is telling governments where they have a charitable status, how they're using donated funds. So under the section of objectives and activities, when you go to the significant activities, it says this: supporting entities of Jehovah's Witnesses with similar aims and objectives abroad. These donations have been in the form of goods such as paper for printing and software licenses. All such donations have promoted religious activity overseas. This activity also includes sending funds directly, primarily to such entities in developing countries where funds are limited. These are used for activities such as construction of places of worship and disaster relief, refurbishment of Kingdom Halls of Jehovah's Witnesses, and construction of new Kingdom Halls. So you can see clearly they're saying, hey, we are sending some of the money we receive in donations overseas to help promote some of our religious activity, especially in developing countries, and at least a portion of that is going to help people when it comes to disaster relief. Going down a little bit farther, when it's talking about public benefit, we have where it says this: public benefit is also achieved in other countries where entities with similar aims are helped to accomplish the objectives described above, as well as with disaster relief in affected areas. So again, they are making it clear that some of the money they're using is going to help poorer countries with disaster relief. So this is where I think we turn from hilarious to nefarious, and that is when we look at what they're actually claiming they're spending when it comes to helping people overseas. So at the beginning, at least a portion of this is helping with disaster relief. Now look at this. The aid, $58 million in total, was given to promote missionary activity, to assist with disaster relief, to support general cost of the local associations and to assist in the operation of local congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, this is where I think they're trying to intentionally muddy the waters. Hey, look, we're sending $51 million overseas to help with, building places of worship that we own, disaster relief, which we're not really doing a lot of, and, just generally helping. So by this overgeneralization, in my mind, they're kind of being deceitful. Because if you say, oh, yes, we spent, $51 million, blah, 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 at least in my mind, you think, okay, I'm sure like half of that is going to support an actual disaster relief or in humanitarian efforts. But that's clearly not the case. That's not what's happening. They are only spending, by their own admission, $12 million globally. Now, this is just the report from the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Britain. There are other reports that, again, I could read and some that I translated, and it was a pretty similar situation where it's like, yeah, we're sending a lot of money overseas to help with, work that has our similar agenda of supporting the religious community, especially in poor countries. And in my mind, I think, are you being totally upfront and honest with these government agencies that are giving you this tax-free status? Maybe we need to let governments know that Watchtower only spent $12 million in providing humanitarian aid. And of that, we don't even know if they spent that on rebuilding Kingdom Hall's branch offices and assembly halls. It could be the case that they spent even less than $12 million, which would be incredibly embarrassing and a total PR disaster for Watchtower. So I call on you, my fellow apostates. I know there's people out there that, everyone does something a little bit different, but maybe write to a news reporter that can look into this a little bit farther than I have. Maybe write to your local government. See if they know about this type of thing. Maybe we can get the ball rolling on something bigger, because I think that the governments should know that this organization that has these demonstrably harmful practices of shunning, of baptizing kids when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and then when they grow up and say, I don't really want to be a Jehovah's Witness, they violate the human right of religious freedom and say, no, you will lose everything. Why are we letting this organization that has demonstrably harmful practices get away with only spending $12 million on humanitarian aid? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So let's get the message out there, and as many people, please make a video about this. Use your social networks. Anything we can do to raise awareness about this is super important. Thank you so much for joining me for this kind of scatterbrained video. There was a lot of information, but I'm supposed to be on my break right now. But I thought that this was important and significant, and it's something that I feel needs to be talked about more. So hopefully this can get the conversation going. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode, and I will see you next time.